Hello, good morning from the UK. Thank you very much for joining us. We look to have quite a few people from across the globe today, which is great to see, and we cannot wait to get started on this webinar today. Now, before we do get stuck into it, I think it makes sense to obviously get to know us as panelists a little bit better. So my name is Abby Child. I am a business manager at CM Industrial, and I specialise in the mining industry, specifically within technology and the software side. Now, in short, CM Industrial is a talent solutions business. We serve the industrial markets like mining, for example, which is where my team specialise. So today in this webinar, we're very much talking about DEI in mining, and this is a specific focus on the gender imbalance within our industry. Now, women are underrepresented at all levels in mining, so what can we do about this, and how can we boost female recruitment, look at DEI initiatives, retention and advancement? So those are the questions that we'll be running with our expert panel of mining leaders today. So let's get better introduced to them. Michelle, over to you. Would you like to kick us off and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks, Abby, and I'm very excited to be part of this panel, and especially to hear some of the views and questions from everyone who's joined us, but especially I'm looking forward to working with Sarah for the first time. So thank you for this opportunity. So yeah, as Abby said, my name's Michelle Ash. I'm the technology executive for Oz Minerals. Prior to this, I was CEO for Dassault Systems in their mining and construction part of their business called Geolvia. And I know mining has a challenge in terms of diversity, especially women in mining, at around about 14%. But software companies are even more challenged. Women coders are still in the low 4s or 5%. So, you know, there's a lot of work to do, I think, for diversity, equity and inclusion. But just to give you a little bit more background, so I've been in mining now 30 years, which is this year, my 30th year, in operating as well as strategic roles. So I've been general manager of mine sites, CEO of companies, head of strategy, chief innovation officers, and worked around the world. So I've been lucky enough to work in Southeast Asia, in China, in Japan, in the North America as well, South America, in Africa, and of course across Australia with the silly Australian accent that you can hear. So hopefully I can bring a wealth of experience to the conversation.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. And Sarah, would you like to get introduced?
Yeah, sure. I'm also super excited for today's discussion, topic close to my heart. And I think, as Michelle rightly points out, not really limited to the mining industry, but quite prevalent in many industries. I am the Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing for Epiroc, which is a mining and construction OEM based in Sweden, although I live in Amsterdam. I am Canadian, born and raised, and I have been in the mining industry for about 15 years. So a little bit less than Michelle, but before that, I cut my teeth in the defense industry. And if you want to talk about a male-dominated industry, that would be the one I would start with, and also automotive. So I have quite extensive experience, a lot of customer sort of facing commercial types of roles. I've been in business, let's say, for the better part of 20 years. And I have been leading very diverse global teams for the last 10 years and building those teams up into something that is an extremely value-adding component of the business. And I think, you know, as we get into this discussion, what we have to acknowledge first and foremost, the most fundamental thing is that if people don't believe diversity adds value to a business, there's no real point in having any further discussion because it's a box ticking exercise. So I think that's like, for me, the most fundamental part is to actually be able to quantify and show the value of a diverse organization, not only gender diversity, diverse. Age, race, religion, experience, culture, all of those things contribute to a very dynamic and normally better solution than what a solution would look like if it's all created by the same type of people. Yeah. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both again for joining me on this. And I think Just to get into the, I suppose, the admin boring side of things, it's just a reminder for everybody who's joining us that we do have everybody on mute and cameras aside from the panelists today, but we do have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the webinar. So we've got producer Dan in the chat, kind of looking at any questions that come through, but also in the Q&A section. So I want this to be as open and conversive as possible. I want to hear different opinions, so please do get your questions over to us as we go through nice and early, and we'll do our best to get as many answered as possible. We do have around 10 minutes at the end to go through those. But yeah, let's get started with the big questions. And I just wanted to start off with a few facts and, why we're here today speaking about this topic, and I suppose why this topic is the first one in our webinar series of Mining Unearthed. Working in this market, I do have several conversations with different clients, and something that has come up in a lot of recruitment conversations, where I do support is, gender diversity and DEI, how can we look at this? And despite kind of several initiatives, women actually only occupy around 14.9% of executive ranks, 18.1% of the industry's board positions, and only 13.2% of C-suite roles within mining. And if you look at kind of globally, you've got African mining having the largest proportion at all levels, and Latin America and Caribbean regions having the lowest figures. But moreover, the percentage of women executives actually in the mining sector has largely remained quite static over time. So we're going to be discussing that, what can we do, within this market to help within DEI, globally within mining. And that leads me on to the first question for Michelle and Sarah today. So, why do we think there are so few female professionals within mining, especially maybe, around that senior leadership role? I think, should we go to Michelle first?
Sure. Yeah. So look, I think there are a number of areas where mining has done really well in terms of attracting women. If we're talking about that element of diversity, and I pick up on Sarah's point that, what we're really trying to create is diversity of thinking, so that the problems that we solve, the solutions we create are holistic and really much more valuable, therefore, than if we're monocultural in some of those solutions. But if we just pick up on women, I think, over the last few years, we've done a fantastic job bringing women into, operator roles. We see a lot more women truck drivers, etc. I think we're still challenged somewhat on the maintenance side, because attracting women and young girls or young women into apprenticeships can still be somewhat challenging and seen as daunting. One area where I think we aren't so good is in the supervisor level, and bringing women into those that frontline supervisory sort of roles. And then, I think we get good again. There's a good representation at superintendent level, at manager level, but again, it starts getting difficult at general manager level. Executives, as you said, has been somewhat flat, and I think the one that's really challenging is the CEO level, where we're still, very underrepresented, but it gets good again at board. So, if I look at, what's creating that patchwork quilt? So I think there's a couple of things. One is how we are thinking about the work to be done. Because, where we have organisations that really requires a lot of the work to be done in remote, rural environments, then it does create challenges for a diverse workforce. And I think we've seen that in, Rio Tinto and BHP, for example, who put IROCs into Perth. If I just take an Australian example, bringing some of those roles from site into IROCs, it did allow a lot more women, but a lot more other people with a diverse background. So whether it be, people from paramedics, people from that had disabilities that maybe were challenging on site. So I think thinking about the location of the work opens up for greater diversity. Absolutely. I think thinking, and it was great to hear some of Sarah's background, but I think thinking differently about the sorts of people that can fill roles is also important. So can we bring people from the military? Can we bring people from manufacturing? Do they have to be 30-year veterans of mining, or have a mining background to do some of the roles? Because again, that opens up the diversity that we can create. So I think thinking about the work and taking out some of our biases around where the work is, how the work, the sorts of skills that they need to get into those roles, and then some of the biases around selection. Because I think one of the things we find often we can get really good balances in shortlists. But still some biasing around, the final candidate. And so how do we break those barriers? And then I think the last bit, and hopefully this is setting Sarah up for a much more deep conversation in some of these areas, but because I know I'm going across this very quickly, but I think the other area, and it's the I bit, it's around inclusion. Because we do see greater turnover from women than men in the mining industry, both within companies. So what does that turnover look like? How do you retain and therefore really around how do you include that diversity that you've now got? But even as an industry, we see greater turnover in women and at different time periods or stages in their lives. So how do we think about inclusion? I think is going to be fundamental to this conversation.
That's a lot. Michelle, you hit a lot of good points there. I think I'll take a slightly more, let's say, holistic view of what I think are the challenges about why we have so few females in executive roles specifically. And I think there are a variety of factors. I think if we talk about, Harvard Business Review many years ago published an article about, they called it the pink ghetto. And it was that in many industries, women are strong managers, strong leaders, but they reach a certain point around middle management where two things happen. Number one, their home lives start to become the priority in terms of the time and demand and dedication to that. And two, they are far less likely than a man to raise their hand for what is called a stretch role, meaning they don't meet every criteria that's listed. And Michelle's absolutely correct by saying in an advert for any role that I need it to be a mining engineer. When I poke the sort of logic behind why we need a mining engineer to do a commercial role or to do a sales role, there is no real logic to it. It's more a classic traditional sort of thing that we put on there. People, therefore, who are not mining engineers don't raise their hands for those roles. But it's been proven again and again by a number of studies that men are very comfortable to apply for a role where they meet limited criteria that are requested, and women don't. So you can imagine the criteria for a CEO is quite large. And I am very blessed to work for a company, which is not by accident, that has a female CEO leading it. And I think we need to sort of take a pause and have a look at how we structure the organizations and the demands that we put upon people to address both those issues. So that's sort of the psychological side of things about why women stop themselves in a way. Or their environment stops them at home. But then there's the other side of it, which is the corporate side of things. Also, every study shows that most leaders prefer to hire people who are a mirror image to themselves because that's where they're comfortable. And I think until we have some more experienced leaders who have built and led diverse teams, we are fighting a battle that is more feelings-based or emotional battle, again, psychological, than actually a fact-based challenge, which is what we have. And I also have to point out here that we're talking about females in the mining industry, but if I said to you, do you think if I were born a man and I wanted to be a nurse, I wouldn't face very similar challenges from both sides, socioeconomic, psychological, as what a woman who wants to be a CEO of a mining company faces? I think it's very similar. So what I say now is not specific to that. It's really addressable to any minority person who's not the majority. And the last thing I want to say about that is that would I like to go join a company and I watch the whole management team stand up and they're all men? They're all middle-aged men and I'm a 25-year-old or 30-year-old female. Am I comfortable in that in that sort of environment, or would I be more likely to veer towards an industry where they look more like I look? That's another factor that we have to contribute to and consider. And it is a little bit about, once you achieve that balance, it becomes by definition a more attractive place for diverse people to work, because they're diverse. They're not a minority. Everybody's sort of the same and treated the same and looks, different. And I think that's something we need to strive for. So that's sort of my take on it, which is a little bit more holistic, but I think also we cannot ignore all those psychological factors that contribute on both sides.
Yeah, I think it can work both ways, and I think it can come down to things like the language used within a job advert or within recruitment as a whole. But also, I think as Michelle touched on, and I think we'll get into this later, but, looking outside of the industry, how can you attract from different areas? How can you have that attraction from different places that may be transferable into mining? And how can you look at this? And I think, posing to you two and kind of looking into talking about some of the solutions to this and how we can support, do you think people may be aware that there's, this issue within DEI in mining? I know obviously it's been spoken about a lot more, I would say, over the past couple of years, but do you think, companies, businesses, people that are working within mining and have been for years are aware of the issue?
Yeah, so I would say I think they're aware of the issue. Sorry, Sarah.
Go ahead. No problem.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Oh, okay, see, we're too polite. That's because we're see the difference right there? Yeah. No, in all seriousness, look, what we call an issue is that's also sort of open to interpretation, right? I mean, people are aware of what their targets are that they're given. Some people are aware that it is a problem for the business that we lack diversity, and some people are aware it's a target, and those are two very different things. If we have a target that says you must hire a certain percentage of diverse candidates, but we don't believe that adds value to our business, then no, I would say we're not aware of the issue as an issue per se. But there's a lot of people that have neither targets nor hiring control who are aware of this as a very serious problem and challenge to this industry and many others. So I think we have to sort of also look at it and say, let's be honest about this. There's a lot of people who acknowledge this as a problem, and a lot of people who own targets on this but don't acknowledge this as a problem.
Yeah.
Over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, no, look, I would agree. I think there are pockets of our industry that absolutely acknowledge it as a problem and are actively doing things about it. I think there are other parts of our industry that in their hearts don't believe it's a problem, because they might have targets or they might have thoughts or even some conversation about it. But if I look at what are you actively doing to therefore resolve or correct, there's nothing. And then there's parts of our industry that are still like any other bell curve, I guess, that parts of our industry that are still in the 1950s. And I talk about in that sense a lot of diversity metric, diverse thoughts about diversity. So even things like how we bring nationals develop training and nationals and to reduce our reliance on expatriates, etc. So other forms of diversity, but I think working with again, I'm always one of those sort of on the bias towards working with those that see this as a problem and dragging the whole sort of average up as being, at least the starting point, rather than trying to, correct the whole bell curve at once. So, I think the great thing that we've seen over the last couple of years is more conversation in certain executives and certain action in some companies around actually doing something about it. I still think, though, the two areas that are most challenged that we still have, I'm not seeing movement in the industry on it, demonstrably, is female CEOs. And to Sarah's point, I think she is blessed by having the opportunity to work with Epiroc that has a female CEO, but more CEOs, so that when these conversations are had at that level, at that executive level, that there is that other side to the story as well. And then, how do we also get more women into supervisor roles? Because, the influence of the supervisor and frankly the general manager is quite significant in terms of the general thinking in our industry, and therefore, bringing that bell curve up with us. I think that's really important. And, I think what can organisations like yours help with, I think it's, not only around trying to sort of map out where are the really talented people in our industry, how do we connect those people into opportunities. To pick up on Sarah's point, how do we encourage those that might be bashful about putting their hand up to sort of move forward into some of these opportunities, even if the opportunity is only to have a conversation and have an interview, and that in itself helps build capability and practice, etc. But how do we do that? But then on the other side, we've spoken a little bit about this biasing around what makes a good candidate. Does that person look and feel and sound like me, or am I feeling a little uncomfortable because they're actually going to have a different view to mine? And how do I think about that, and therefore then bring somebody into my team who might be actually different? And I think there's a role for organisations like yours to really help work with us leaders around how do we do that, because I know, having built diverse and work with diverse teams, that it's not all roses. It's actually really tough to manage a diverse team because by definition they're not going to be the same as you. They are going to disagree with you. There will be things that grate on you, or you're challenged by, and that's not always a fantastic feeling as a leader, but that's exactly why you've got a diverse team. So you have to work with that. So I think there's some real capability build there that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think especially kind of mentioning how we can work as a recruiter. I mean, I try to do it with my clients. If I speak with candidates, I'll always do a 2-stage before I do send any candidates over to clients, be it on the phone, but also if I can meet them, amazing, but appreciate I'm in the UK, but via video call. And sometimes the CV just doesn't, may not cover every single mark, but you've had that conversation, and I would encourage, either we can do send them a video and you can put set questions on which may help with that, or just have a conversation with them, learn a little bit more about them and how their talent can be transferable. And I think that is really, really useful and really critical as well when looking at a diverse workforce, because I think in anything, whether you're looking at diversity or not, a CV or anything written in a piece of paper is so difficult to get anything about you across, and you've got to, everybody says keep it to 2 pages, and how can we make that stand out? So can we do videos, can we do blind CVs, those types of things we can look at there. But I think in terms of getting into this as well, what can we do as an industry to attract more female professionals into mining? So I think, I don't know which you prefer, talking about company initiatives. Michelle, would you like to speak around that? What can we do to attract more?
Yeah, so yeah, look, absolutely, great question. So the sorts of things we do, we work with schools and universities to try to even, attract a greater diversity of person, even just into some of the base skills, so STEM especially, which, in some countries has been a declining area, especially for young people generally, but young women to go into. So we do a lot of work trying to make the option of coming into those sorts of disciplines, as well as, really talking about mining and the things that mining brings to the world. Because I think one of the challenges at that level is that, young people are still very affected by avatar. If I can say, speak about my son for a few seconds. He used to think that I was the greatest because I was a miner and I had these big trucks, and then avatar came along and then suddenly I was the worst. But thank God that Minecraft came along and I was suddenly actually a lot better again. But there are these mixed feelings, and in some cases quite adverse feelings towards mining, not just held by young people, but even the general population around mining's contribution to the world. So I think certainly for us, talking to communities, governments, universities, etc., about mining's contribution to the world, how it's helping with decarbonisation, how it helps with fluoride in your toothpaste and the clothes you're wearing, but also acknowledging that we have challenges and trying to make those challenges sound attractive. So we do a lot of work on innovation and challenges and hackathons and trying to create a really interesting ecosystem around us so that we have more chance of attracting, therefore, interesting people. And now I'm not just talking to base roles, but even into some of our other roles. We certainly also do things like try to have quite interesting, diverse groups of people on the interview panels outside of the area that is recruiting. So again, we can get a diverse thought or a diverse thinking around candidates, and we do that sometimes even with external professionals, senior professionals that have left the industry, retired, or sometimes in other parental leave, etc., helping us, just giving us a very different perspective of different candidates. And so that's been quite interesting as well, as some of the initiatives, as well as looking to see how we can challenge ourselves. Go back to some of the first questions, the first things that I said. What work do we really need to have in a specific location, and what work can we be very much more open with the location, again, to try to get the greatest group of talented, diverse people that we can, applying to some of these roles. And then, of course, we've got other things like work-life plans. So everybody in Oz Minerals has the work-life plan, and that's to try to sort of formally articulate with your leader what is important to you in terms of in your life. So for me, for example, I really like starting early in the morning, because typically at some point in the middle of the day, I've got a lot of things to do with my animals and my spouse, etc., that I need to sort of attend to, and then I'll come back and do another chunk of work at the end of the day. And so having that flexibility and that formalisation of that flexibility takes some of the tension out of that conversation, and that that ability to be inclusive to different needs, and creating that work-life balance.
Fabulous, thank you. And I think just a reminder before I pass over to Sarah, if you have any comments throughout this from the attendees in terms of what we're covering, or maybe what your company, where you work for, what they do in addition to attraction or even retention within the business, it'd be really good to hear your thoughts as well. But yeah, I'll pass over to you, Sarah. What do you think you can do as an industry, to attract female professionals, from an industry initiative, or even again as a company initiative?
Yeah, I think Michelle touched on a lot of the stuff sort of from a corporate point of view, including things like gender neutral language in the advert. You need a very different, I would say, the traditional, post it and hope that you get some strong diverse candidates that apply. That route doesn't work very well. So I personally tend to lean on myself and all the other female leaders in my organization to reach out to their networks when I have a role that is good, and to shake the tree, so to speak, and see what we can get in that way. We use a lot more recruiters and headhunters for diverse candidates, because it requires more effort to find them. But beyond that stuff, which is, I think, well covered, I think if we talk a little bit more specifically about what we as leaders can do and what has worked sort of in the past, I would say there's a few things that work extremely well. And number one is vigilance. And by that, I mean, for example, I have a very broad and large international organization, which means there's always ongoing recruitments at any time, usually 5 to 10 ongoing anywhere in the world within my organization, which means I have access in our HR system to all the CVs and all the applicants that apply for those roles, even though they're not reporting to me. They can be grandchildren roles to me. By be vigilant, it means I actually go in and I peruse those CVs quite regularly, and I look for female candidates, and I check out those CVs myself, because even if they're not perhaps the perfect fit for the role that they've applied for, there are so many other things that are always ongoing, or even plans that I know that are coming organizationally that will require new roles and new people. I can take those CVs myself and start to work with them, and have done so in the past. So that's one sort of thing that you can do. Number two is to be specific. And I'm very specific with my own team. I have 21 direct reports in the extended management team, and they have very specific targets, and they understand clearly the expectations, but also why. Why do they have those targets? Why are those the expectations? It's not limited to gender diversity, but I think we need to be specific when we talk about these things. You don't just give a number or a target, you give a situation and a timeline. And we need to make sure that we have those conversations in an open way, that people accept and understand the value of that and are doing it because they want to do it. The third thing is to be flexible. And that's really, really key, I would say, and has been very important in the development of my organization, which is 50% female in the management team, the core management team, and 26% female overall in the whole organization, which is for an operational group, which is sales and marketing. We're not talking about HR, we're not talking about the traditional, more female roles in the mining industry. We have had to work in a way that is a little bit different. So when I see those CVs pop up that are potentially really good possibilities, and I look at them like seeds. I always think about younger people with less experience, like a seed that you can plant and grow a forest. Yeah. Sometimes you need to make a plot to put that seed in the land and do something with. So we've had opportunities before where I had really good candidates applying for a job that they are very underqualified for, an expert level role, for example, when they're just graduated from university, but we don't say no. I have created a role for those people, and I call them breeder roles. Like, they're the ones that will become sort of the expert in 5 years. And we create roles sort of to suit the candidate. Not every company and not every team is, let's say, has the authority or the budget or the capability to do something like that. But when I say be flexible, I mean, you have to look outside of this box must be filled by this person with this qualifications, which is much what Michelle said. You have to be a lot more flexible in sort of what you're demanding for qualifications, but also sometimes in your organizational setup and structure. Mm-hmm. Most of the business, I would say, in my part of the business, which is a great deal of product and application knowledge, extensive mining experience. These people are between 50 and 65 years old. They're male, and they've been working for the same company or in the same industry for 30 plus years, all of them. So to be able to replace that knowledge base, which is so core to our business, doesn't happen overnight. I can't just bring somebody in from an external industry or even from within the same industry, but a different equipment provider. It has to be grown over time. And so that's the kind of thing where we have to be a little bit flexible in how we set up our organizations to create these feeder roles that go through and become sort of the next experts. And then I think the last thing to say is I have very specific targets when we roll out new roles, which are related to technology, because technology is a new field. We have to do a lot of training in this field. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, if they're 50 or 25, when we hire them into this, they don't have the requisite knowledge to do this job from the get-go. So for those kinds of new roles we have that are focused on emerging technologies, where we have to anyhow train, the targets are much more specific and much higher in that, because that's the perfect opportunity to say, look, go target yourself some recent graduates or 2 or 3 years in the industry or in a parallel industry. We have to invest a lot of time and energy to train these roles, no matter who they are. So that is a very practical space to start to grow the next forest of technical experts who in 5 years will become sort of the face of the company for technical expertise. That's sort of my experience on an individual level of how I've been able to sort of drive a lot of the improvements in that space for Epiroc at this point.
I think the analogy around the seed, I really liked that, and I think it's almost as a headhunter, as a recruiter in this space. I suppose we have the luxury of having a network of candidates as well. People I might speak to about roles specifically, and they may not be right for that position, or something that they're just quite missing, or after kind of speaking to them and getting through their CV more and from the information that they have on LinkedIn. I can then come back to them and say, look, I do have this position, or I can speak at a different level. And I've had this recently where candidates have had different skill sets, and they'd be great within the business. It's just we don't have an opening at the moment. See if they're around still, within 3 months' time. And it may be that they've found something, but it may be that they're still there. And I really do like that analogy and how you can do that. And I have experienced this, I think, touching upon what, Michelle, you said around, obviously, the software and technical side, within mining. And obviously, this is very new. We're seeing a lot of startups, especially in Australia and in Europe. And I myself worked in software sales. I haven't worked in tech before. I've recruited within tech within my old business. But I've worked within software sales for the past 2.5 years, and I learned throughout. And I was one of 2 women, a software company. It's 50 of us, and I think there was 6 women working for the software business. And it was just great to see, different talent coming in, but you see it across different industries. And it is just that finding people that have that ability and aptitude to learn, and been able to, I suppose, be molded as well, understand the language a little bit more. And I think combining tech and mining together is obviously a huge thing. To have them both together, is really great. And, I do speak with a lot of females who are wanting to, get into it. And, how can we do this? And, would it help as recruiters if we do things like blind CVs, for example? Or even if it's just extra comments, just to, again, get a CV popping out or somebody's skills. Do either of you do blind CVs? I think, Michelle, you may have mentioned it before around blind CVs. Do you do that at the moment?
Yeah, so look, we have done blind CVs. And in fact, we've done both. We've experimented to see, how that changed. And I think it is helpful to at least get a set of candidates, to a certain level. I think what's always challenging, though, at the end of the day, is you have somebody sitting across the desk or on a Zoom, whatever it might be, interacting with somebody, and all of our biases come out during that process. That whether it's the last interview or the second or third interview, etc. So I think the blind CVs gets you a better result potentially in terms of that sort of first round or shortlisting. But you still got that interview process. So I think for me, most probably more helpful is unpicking with the people that are going to be doing the interviewing or doing the recruiting, making the recruitment decision, unpicking some of their biases about the role, about the requirements of the role, about where that role has to be situated, or, if I think of all the reasons why sometimes really good candidates don't either accept the role or continue, in the discussion, and bust that thinking, and also bust our thinking about our own unconscious biases. I was reflecting myself the other day because a candidate came in, really talented person, and but they had a visible tattoo sort of here, so they had a nice suit on and a visible tattoo there. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I am staring at this person's tattoo. And, I'm reflecting on myself how biased I was, clearly. And so I had to unpick that, like literally in the interview, and sort of take that away and then, talk with the person about, what we were talking about. But so we all have it, even those of us who've worked in the diversity space and the inclusion space for a very long time. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves what biases we have. And I think that will help significantly.
Yeah, and I think, I was looking into, different businesses, this past week or so, and I found, especially around DEI, but especially I was looking, there was one at Tech Resources, for example. They've released new inclusion and diversity committees. They're also piloting a dedicated prayer room and nursing rooms, to be able to give that privacy to women, but also, religions, looking at people of colour, how can this be included? And they've also recently, I think especially Rio Tinto and tech again, looking at partnering with Pride at work, and covering that side. So it's good to see that this is moving, but it is, again, more kind of recent movements that I've seen as well. I think, so just going on to our next question, but how do we keep talent? How do we retain talent? How do we keep talented female professionals in the industry. Sarah, over to you.
Such a timely question, because I just read such an interesting article. I think it was, again, Harvard Business Review article on why we lose, or companies lose, strongly and very highly thought of talented female employees. And the gist of it, if we will, it was a long article, but the gist of it was essentially companies overestimate the loyalty of a female versus a male. Meaning, we don't think that they'll bother looking around. We don't think that they're going to be, checking out what the market value is for them, potentially with other competing companies. And I thought that was so interesting that, again, everything comes down to psychology at the end of the day around this sort of a topic. But essentially, the companies overestimate the loyalty of women, or estimate it to be higher than that of men. And I think that was a new learning for me. I have not thought about it from that context before. But from my point of view, what I can personally do in order to help with the retention is to first and foremost be present. Be present. I participate in grandparent interviews. I participate in panel interviews, much as Michelle said, just to show the people who are looking to join the company or to move within the company that there are opportunities for them at all levels of the company. This is not something that's limited to, entry-level roles. So be present. I'm very much in the mentoring space. So Epiroc has a female mentorship program, which I have done in the past, but I've taken on a more, let's say, personal vested interest in my own female grandchildren. And I use that term because that's the terminology that we utilize here. Within the organization, I undertake a lot of skip level meetings, meaning I meet one-on-one or in groups with people. And I'm in the process now of rolling out for the whole organization, including the wider global sales organization, which is this much female and this much male, some very specialized training, which we will lead from the underground division, which is quite specific to females in the mining industry. So yes, it's the technical product and application training, but there's other training in there around conflict resolution, around what to do when you feel uncomfortable, around how to manage situations that they may come across as a minority in a vastly dominated male part of our business, which is the customer facing sales side of it, of course. And those are all sorts of things that I think are very helpful. And then the other side of it is not only females, but young females in particular, or at least the ones that we have in our organization, are highly ambitious. They have good plans for themselves, and they want to be a CEO. They want to be a vice president, then a GM, and then a CEO. And I think that's so important that we stoke those fires, because that will carry them across the pink ghetto, so to speak. It will take them, as long as we support them in that way. And the other thing I think about a lot is work-life balance, which Michelle also spoke about. We don't have written plans, but we have very clear sort of ways of working in my organization, which is that your family and your health and your personal life come before the business 100% of the time. And we set very clear boundaries around that. No, I don't email after 5 p.m. No, I don't email on weekends. I don't answer my phone after 7 p.m. unless it's an emergency, and we use WhatsApp for that. Very clear boundaries, so people know they can have a life. They can have kids, they can have a husband or animals, and they can enjoy that part of their lives even while they work in this organization and in this industry. And I don't say it's possible in every instance or every day of the year, but as a general rule of thumb, that is the way that we work. And it works well for people to feel involved and included, all of those things. So, I think regular communications as well is a really key part of this. We do a lot of town hall meetings, and we talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about it frequently, and not only in the management team. And I think that also helps because people really feel they belong. And the very last thing I want to say about that is numbers. Yeah. If you were part of a minority and you were 4% of the organization, but you see now that organization is 40% female, I think most women, like I said, or minorities, are more comfortable in an environment where they're more equal and less a minority. So the more we can actually create a diverse organization and team and foundation, the more comfortable people are to stay and be retained in that organization, as opposed to being driven out of it by a toxic environment where they are treated like a real minority.
Yeah, and it's a good point really there, just before we hand to Michelle, but around kind of the loyalty of women and maybe not looking at it. And I think especially with within the mining industry's actually looking to attract more women. They are naturally going to be more targeted. You're going to see somebody really strong with really good skill set, and they're going to be picked up straight away. And it's how can you as a business keep them in the business. But no, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think over to you, kind of Michelle, maybe on more of an individual level. How can we create an inclusive environment there? How can we retain them?
Yeah, so look, I think, Sarah gave an exceptionally, I think, comprehensive response. So I'll just pick up on a couple of areas maybe to double down on. But, I think Sarah spoke about a few things that I would put into that sort of courageous leadership, putting yourself out there, being a mentor, championing, the particular causes, having those conversations. I think that the one step I would go further, and I know in some organisations this is more challenging than others, but it is really important, I think, in leadership, is when you see something that is counter to what you are trying to achieve. So people acting non-inclusively, or in is it non-inclusively, or in a counter way, that you stop it there and then. So whether that is a snide comment, or a joke, or bullying, or just turning one's back, or there's all sorts of different subtle and less than subtle ways that the people show that they are not being inclusive, that we step in and we name that, and do something about it, because I think where I have seen organisations both be successful and successful organisations deteriorate is when those small 100 little things that happen every day around us aren't dealt with, or there isn't that positive reinforcement of the good things, I guess, that people do. So stepping in also when the positive things happen. So I think that's very important to the individual's experience of the organisation as well. I'd absolutely agree with the challenge element. I think to keep any diversity or any fantastic, talented people, constantly making sure that they are challenged and given really interesting, exciting work and opportunity to see that there are pathways to their success. I think that is also a very important part of, again, keeping talented people part of the process, or part of the organisation. So I think those two things are really important. And then I think you spoke about some of the other ways, in terms of, if I am different, being able to allow me to express that difference in an authentic way. So whether that's, around prayer rooms, or whether that's around, my sexual preference, or whether that is around, the way I go about doing things, and having that validated, around me, again, is very important to both psychological safety and in many cases physical safety as well, and therefore people staying, retention and inclusion. So I'd there were the couple of things I'd mostly just double down on in terms of what Sarah said.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're at 10 minutes to go. Really good timing. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, so I'd be really keen just to cover these off. And I think, to be honest, for both of you are both very, very established within mining. You're both really successful in your careers. And we've got a question through from Lara that says, what would you recommend for an aspirational young girl who's looking to sit at an executive level in mining in the future? How have you taken these steps within your career? And I think, Sarah, you touched upon that kind of briefly in your last answer to the last question. So be keen just to hand that one to you.
This is a hard question to answer because I think it's so individual. I was asked once a few years ago by an MBA thesis student to explain to her all the ways that I have faced diversity challenges myself in this industry, and I could not think of one. And that was like an eye-opener for me, because I think it is it's very individual. I've spoken now with my own peers who are also at this level in the organization and in the industry, who've had terrible stories that they've told about things people have said to them or how they have treated them. And I don't have those kinds of stories to tell. But what I would say in general, for any aspirational young girl or boy, but particularly girls who want to be at an executive level in any industry in the future, results is the key to success. Results paired with relationships drive your success. And I think the thing that's important for anyone who's a minority, so it doesn't matter whether it's female or a different kind of minority, is that you are not somebody who accepts being treated in a lesser way. And it's really difficult sometimes. And so I say it's so individual, because some people it's easy for them sort of to counter that. I'm somebody who doesn't accept being treated in a lesser way. And that's natural to me. That just comes naturally to me, but it doesn't come naturally to everybody. So build a network of people, of supporters who can help you when you need help. Find the people in your business or in your industry who can support you as well, who can act as mentors and coaches and guides, even about something as small. Somebody said this to me and it didn't make me feel good. What can I do, or what should I do? Find those people who can help you. And also remember, it's an individual journey. So there is no one sort of prescriptive answer on that. But that's mine. And I think there was a second part. How have I taken the steps in my career? It is to deliver good results, which comes, by the way, from building awesome teams. 100% of the time, could not deliver great results without an awesome team, whether it's my peers or the team I made myself. The people around you and the relationships you build will contribute to the results that you can deliver. And that's my response on that one, Michelle.
Yeah, so look, I would absolutely agree with everything Sarah said. So I won't repeat any of that, about building those networks and things. But the couple of other bits that I would add is, so I'm going to pick up on what Sarah said a while ago around women not putting themselves forward. So, typically guys will put themselves forward if they've got like 50% of the criteria. Women want 120. And if I reflect on my career, I've had some fantastic doors opened to me, some of which I thought was fantastic at the time, others of which I complained and, I was angry at the person that said I should be, a supervisor in Africa before they would promote me. I was angry. But I think when those doors are opened, it is important to take that step forward. And if you are scared about how you are going to do the role, and you're thinking, oh my God, have I taken on too much and I've bitten off more than I can chew, that is a good thing. Because that strength and that nervousness will get you to focus on delivery, as Sarah said, focus on building a network, focus on building a great team around you, and that you're going to be stepping up in terms of your capability. That has happened with me with almost every role that I've ever taken on. Is you go like, oh God, how am I going to do this one? Like, what was I thinking? So I think you're walking through those doors that get opened is really important. And then, I think the other, I oscillate a little bit between, because at one point someone said to me, have I experienced discrimination and things in the industry? And I said to them, no, I don't see male and female. I've just get on and get stuff done. And it's sort of true. Like, I just blundered my way through sometimes, and just, other people went to me and said, God, that person was really rude. And I went, no, I didn't think it was rude. We just moved forward. So sometimes being blind to these things is helpful. But at the same time, not letting people, step on your difference, I guess, let's put it that way, is also important, because you don't want to undervalue your difference and therefore be like everybody else, because that's also not true to yourself. It's not authentic, and it doesn't bring, at the end of the day, the diversity that's needed in our industry. But that is a fine balance.
I want to applaud
sometimes
that.
I walk on
That
the
whole
right.
last part, that I couldn't. Wow, yes, raw, so true. All of that stuff is so true. Don't let anybody step on your diversity. I'm going to hold on to that one and use it. It's really good. That is the thing that makes you special, or makes you And I mean, it's something that you should be showcasing, not hiding.
Be proud of it, I think. And I think it's just having conversations as well. I mean, from a recruitment perspective, something around like leaning on, your strong network that we have, obviously speaking to you, Michelle, and you, Sarah, as mentors in the space, what can I learn from you? And I think just soaking up like a sponge and being an individual and not hiding who you are is massively part of this within mining, but in life in general, I would say, just a life lesson there. And leaning on other people's expertise. I do get questions asked around, what can I do to add to this? What can I do to add to this? And I can advise so far, but I would just say have conversations with those people around you. As you said, Sarah, use your teams. We are on 3 minutes to go. We do have another question that I'll run through really quickly, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. But we've had a question in from Christina saying, one issue they've been seeing is around clear career pathways and setting out individual plans annually for personal career growth. Do we think there's enough done within the industry to really ensure we're encouraging and making the right resources accessible for women to succeed? Just a really quick answer from Michelle. I can see the cogs turning.
I'm thinking. So okay. So look, on one level, I would say I've never relied on anyone else to map out my career other than me. I've taken it by the horns, and I do that for myself. I take advice, and I think about what people tell me, but I find that's an accountability for me. But if I then broaden that and say, do we have enough things accessible in the industry, right resources for women? Look, I'm sure there's things that we could do differently to give some of these resources. And I think Sarah actually named some of the really good things that Epiroc is doing to build, capability for women to be in the industry. Yeah.
Perfect. Sarah?
No, I have a short answer. The answer is no. Yeah. But I would also say again here, like it comes down to the leader. Right. I mean, I do a lot of career mapping with my team, and not my grandchildren, but my direct team. I encourage them to do the same with their teams. It's totally sporadic. I've had great managers in the past who really sort of helped with this, and I can give one tip to anybody out there who's a leader. One of the greatest things I ever got asked was, what is the job you want 2 or 3 jobs from now? So not what is the next job, but what is the job you want 2 or 3 jobs from now? And then where are you today, and what are the right kinds of roles to develop you between here and there that you can take, and what kind of training do you need to get ready for the next one? And that is like, for me, it's such a simple tip, but it's so helpful. And you can ask yourself that. You don't need a manager to do it for you, to Michelle's point. I also don't wait for a manager to help me with this stuff. But if you have a good leader who is leading you and can sort of show you good tips and tricks and give you a toolbox for how to do it for yourself, I think a lot of people who are relatively new to employment in general don't have a clue on how to start with that, but start thinking along those lines. And I mean, there's lots of online resources available, not limited to the mining industry. So you can help yourself if your industry or your company or your manager isn't helping you. Else you can reach out to people like Michelle and I, who can give you tips and tricks anytime to sort of aid. Yeah, we're here. We're also here to help. That's what our passion is, growing sort of diversity in the mining industry.
Perfect answers, and I think that takes us right up to 10 a.m. My time anyway. And thank you so much. So that's all the questions we've had in, and thank you everybody that's joined us today. I really do hope that you're taking something away from this session, and it's either giving you, a bit of an for your day, or, giving you a bit of, food for thought as to, what you potentially could do, within your company and within your industry, and where you potentially to take your career as well, and some advice there. If you do have any extra questions at all, please feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn, or I know maybe Sarah or Michelle, but I'm more than happy to take them, pass them on. And I really, honestly, thank you both so much for your input today. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've really, really enjoyed this session. And just to wrap up, for anyone who couldn't quite attend, or anybody who wants to pass it on, we will have a PDF of the session being produced which will essentially feature all of today's major takeaways. This will be created next week, so we'll pass that on to you with all the little bits there, but we'll also have an email going out today giving you the opportunity to reserve your copy of the PDF and also a recording of the session. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day or the rest of your evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Yes, so we'll see you in the next session.
Great. Thanks, Abby. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sarah. See you, Abby.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.